below. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Let's go. The scene was one of unfathomable horror, a tableau of domestic terror discovered in the heart of a home. The chilling narrative begins not with a gradual descent into darkness, but with a stark, gut-wrenching revelation. A mother was found dead, her life brutally extinguished. But the horror did not end there. Beside her, in a shocking and devastating extension of the violence, her infants lay lifeless, also brutally killed. The immediate impact of such a discovery sent a cold wave through the responders and anyone who would later learn of the tragedy. The gravity of the crime was instant and absolute, a profound violation of the most sacred bond. The victim at the center of this grim discovery was a young mother, a woman who, to all outward appearances, lived a life not unlike countless others. While her name may be withheld for privacy in some reports, or referred to generally, her background quickly painted a picture of a nurturing individual. She was frequently described as loving and caring, devoted to her young children. Her presence on social media often showcased the simple joys of daily life. Photographs of her babies, updates on their milestones, the mundane yet cherished moments of motherhood. These digital footprints, capturing a life filled with tenderness and ordinary aspirations, created a stark, horrifying contrast to her horrific end. The public image she projected, one of warmth and maternal affection, made the brutal reality of her final moments all the more incomprehensible. This was not an individual who seemed destined for such a violent conclusion. Her life, from the outside, appeared to be one of quiet dedication to her family. Her days, much like many parents, were filled with the routines of caring for infants, grocery runs, and perhaps brief interactions with neighbors or friends. There was nothing in her public demeanor or recorded activities that hinted at the profound darkness that would soon engulf her private world. The grim discovery unfolded within the supposed sanctuary of a home, a place where safety and warmth should have prevailed. The details of how the bodies were found painted a chilling picture of an invaded private world, now transformed into a scene of unspeakable tragedy. The specific location was a residential dwelling, likely a quiet house or apartment, perhaps one that had previously been a picture of domestic contentment. The victims were discovered in an intimate space within the home, most likely a bedroom, a place typically associated with rest and security, now forever stained by horrific violence. The individuals who made this gut-wrenching find were not prepared for the tableau of despair that awaited them. In some instances, it was police officers responding to a welfare check or a concerned call, entering the premises with standard caution but no true forewarning of the horror inside. In other cases, the discovery fell to utterly unsuspecting family members, individuals who walked into their loved one's home expecting normalcy, only to be met with a sight that would forever haunt their memories. Their shock and trauma upon encountering such a scene would have been immediate and profound, an instant descent into a nightmare from which there was no awakening. What was seen within that room was a horrifying spectacle of brutality. The mother, the primary victim, had been executed, a term that implies a deliberate, fatal act, often inflicted with a firearm or a sharp instrument, carried out with deadly intent. Her life was taken with a chilling finality. But the violence extended beyond her. Her infants, fragile and utterly defenseless, were also found deceased beside her. The specific methods of their demise varied, but often involved horrific acts such as being stabbed or suffocated, methods that speak to a profound and desperate depravity. The scene was one of overwhelming devastation, a stark and immediate testament to an act of extreme violence that spared no one, not even the most vulnerable. As the initial shock began to subside, giving way to the grim realities of the situation, the wheels of justice began to turn. Law enforcement, trained to approach even the most horrific scenes with methodical precision, arrived en masse. The priority was immediate and clear: secure the area and preserve any potential evidence. Crime scene officers meticulously worked to secure the area, establishing perimeters to prevent contamination and ensuring that every possible detail of the tragedy was preserved. They moved with a deliberate, painstaking slowness, aware that every misplaced step or overlooked item could jeopardize the entire investigation. With the scene locked down, the meticulous process of documentation began. Forensic photographers moved through the space, capturing hundreds of images from every conceivable angle. They took photos of the victims, their positions, the surrounding environment, and any object that might hold a clue. These images, clinical in their detail, would later serve as an undeniable record of the events. Following the photography, crime scene technicians began to collect evidence. This involved carefully bagging and labeling any potential weapons discovered near the bodies, such as a knife or a firearm, crucial tools in reconstructing the sequence of events. They searched for any signs of a break-in, scrutinizing doors, windows, and entry points for forced entry marks, shattered glass, or disturbed locks, attempting to determine if an external intruder had been involved. They meticulously processed surfaces for fingerprints, collected fibers, hair, and any biological material that could provide genetic profiles. Every single piece, no matter how small, was treated as a potential key to unlocking the truth behind this heinous act. The sheer volume of this initial evidence gathering underscored the severity of the crime and the determination of law enforcement to piece together the sequence of events that led to such a devastating outcome. The scene, once a home, was now a silent testament to ultimate violation, waiting to yield its secrets. As the initial shock of the crime scene gave way to the meticulous work of forensic investigation, the first crucial question for law enforcement centered on the identity of the perpetrator. Was this the act of a stranger, a random and brutal home invasion that escalated to an unimaginable degree? Or did the violence stem from a more intimate, internal source, a profound breakdown within the fabric of the family itself? These early inquiries, often based on the immediate visual evidence and the absence or presence of specific clues, began to shape the direction of the unfolding investigation. Police started by looking for any first hints at suspects, examining the immediate environment for anything out of place or anyone connected to the victims who might have behaved unusually. The initial assessment of the crime scene provided some crucial, albeit grim, indicators. Were there signs of a forced entry, suggesting an external intruder had breached the sanctity of the home? Or did the lack of such evidence point towards someone known to the victims, someone who had been granted access? These fundamental observations guided the early stages of the inquiry. The presence of specific individuals around the mother's life also came under immediate scrutiny. Was there a domestic context to the crime, hinting at long-standing tensions, recent conflicts, or a history of strained relationships? Or did the scene suggest the involvement of complete strangers, perhaps individuals driven by motives entirely external to the family's private world? Every person who had recent contact with the mother or her infants became a person of interest, their actions and whereabouts during the crucial hours meticulously cross-referenced. The investigation began to piece together the victim's final days, searching for any suspicious behavior or overlooked warning signs that might have signaled the impending catastrophe. With the crime scene secured and initial evidence collected, the investigative focus broadened to encompass the lives of the victims and the people closest to them. The police began to outline potential suspects, categorizing individuals who, by their relationship or proximity, might have had opportunity or motive. The most obvious and often first individual to be scrutinized in cases of domestic homicide is a partner or ex-partner. This is due to the unfortunate statistical prevalence of such crimes occurring within existing or dissolved intimate relationships. Investigators would delve deep into the history of any romantic connections, looking for records of arguments, domestic disputes, or restraining orders. Beyond intimate partners, the circle of suspicion would expand to include other individuals with close access to the home and the children. This could include a babysitter, someone regularly entrusted with the care of the infants, or a relative who had a key, frequent access, or a complex dynamic with the mother. The trust placed in these individuals meant their access would not necessarily leave signs of forced entry, making them harder to immediately rule out. Alternatively, if clear signs of forced entry were apparent, the focus would shift towards an external intruder, perhaps someone with a criminal history of home invasions or a random, violent perpetrator. The methodical process of eliminating suspects through alibis and background checks would commence for each category, slowly narrowing the vast field of possibilities. Simultaneously, the investigation began to present motive speculation, attempting to understand the driving force behind such an extreme act of violence. The potential motives were as varied as the suspects themselves. Could it have been an act of revenge, a calculated response to a real or perceived wrong? Was it born of despair, a catastrophic mental collapse leading to a murder-suicide, or a desperate act by someone overwhelmed by their circumstances? Mental illness was always a critical consideration, as profound psychological disturbances can tragically manifest in extreme violence, particularly against those closest to the perpetrator. In some grim scenarios, financial gain could be a factor, with insurance money or other monetary benefits serving as a chilling incentive. To provide this context, investigators began a thorough review of the mother's and her close contacts' lives. They examined background context such as any existing relationship tensions, looking for signs of ongoing conflict or recent breakups. They delved into the family's financial stress, checking for bankruptcy filings, overwhelming debt, or sudden changes in economic status that might push someone to desperate acts. Any recorded mental health issues in the family or among close associates would be critically examined, looking for a history of psychosis, severe depression, or violent outbursts. Finally, investigators would review lifestyle warning signs, seeking any documented instances of escalating aggression, substance abuse, or any behavior that deviated from established patterns and could have foreshadowed such a horrific outcome. Every piece of information, no matter how personal or seemingly unrelated, became a potential puzzle piece in understanding the motive behind the unthinkable. Amidst the methodical, dispassionate work of the investigation, the human element of this profound tragedy resonated deeply within the community. While police meticulously gathered evidence and sifted through potential motives, the collective consciousness of the neighborhood grappled with an unbearable loss. The media, drawn to the sheer horror of the crime, sought out those closest to the deceased mother and her babies, giving a platform to their overwhelming grief. The voices that emerged were filled with heartbreak and disbelief, painting a poignant picture of the woman whose life had been so cruelly cut short. Interviews with distraught relatives became a powerful, albeit painful, testament to the victim's character. Her parents, siblings, or perhaps close cousins spoke through tears, describing the joy she had found in motherhood and the seemingly tranquil existence she had built. Their words conveyed a profound sense of injustice, an aching void left by the sudden, violent erasure of their loved ones. Neighbors, still in shock, recounted their interactions with the mother, often describing her as friendly, unassuming, and completely dedicated to her children. They struggled to reconcile the horrific crime with the quiet, domestic life they had observed from afar. The street, once a tableau of ordinary suburban rhythms, now felt permanently altered, tainted by the darkness that had erupted within one of its homes. A close friend, perhaps someone who shared her daily routines or confided in her regularly, would describe her caring nature, her dreams for her children, and the small, everyday struggles and triumphs she faced. These personal anecdotes, delivered with a mix of sorrow and lingering confusion, underscored the profound tragedy. A life brutally ended, leaving behind only echoes of warmth and maternal affection. The voiceover, or in some instances on-screen text, would emphasize a critical point: that nothing in her life, no outward sign or prior indication, suggested such a violent outcome. This absence of apparent warning signs only deepened the mystery for those who knew her, making the brutality of the crime even more difficult to comprehend. The disconnect between her public persona and her horrific demise fueled a desperate need for answers, for any explanation that could make sense of the senseless. The community, like the family, desperately sought a reason, a motive, a piece of information that could somehow fit into their understanding of the world. A world where mothers and their babies were not brutally executed in their own homes. As the initial emotional outpouring subsided, the methodical, often painstaking work of the investigation continued in earnest. Police began the arduous process of piecing together evidence, a complex puzzle where every fragment, no matter how small, could lead to a critical breakthrough. The crime scene, meticulously processed, began to yield its secrets through the lens of modern forensics. Forensic analysis became paramount. DNA samples, painstakingly collected from every surface, were sent to labs for precise profiling, hoping to match genetic material to a perpetrator. Fingerprints, lifted from various objects and entry points, were run through national databases, searching for any existing criminal records. Weapon analysis, if a weapon was recovered, involved microscopic examination of ballistics or blade marks to determine its exact characteristics and potential origin. Even trace evidence, like fibers or hairs, could provide crucial links to a suspect. This scientific scrutiny aimed to build an undeniable physical connection between the crime and the individual responsible. Parallel to the forensic work, detectives embarked on a comprehensive digital deep dive. They meticulously examined the victims' lives, scrutinizing every aspect of their online and electronic presence. This included reviewing the phone or digital trail of the deceased mother and anyone closely associated with her. Investigators analyzed messages on her mobile devices, looking for any threats, arguments, or unusual communications leading up to the crime. Calls were logged, their times and durations scrutinized, attempting to identify any suspicious interactions or individuals who might have had an unexpected presence in her life during the critical period. Social media activity, email accounts, and even financial transactions were explored for anomalies or inconsistencies that could point towards a hidden motive or an escalating conflict. This digital footprint, often invisible to the naked eye, could reveal patterns of communication, burgeoning tensions, or secret relationships that shed new light on the domestic context of the crime. As the physical evidence and digital trails converged, the investigative team began to zero in on a suspect. Often, in cases of this nature, the evidence subtly but relentlessly points towards someone within the victim's immediate circle, rather than an unknown assailant. Statistical probabilities, combined with the emerging forensic and digital data, frequently highlighted a spouse or live-in partner as the most probable perpetrator. This focus, while heartbreaking for families, is a grim reality of criminal investigation. The next stage involved meticulously scrutinizing the suspect's narrative against the hard evidence. A common area of inconsistency involved alibis. A suspect's carefully constructed timeline inconsistencies would become apparent when compared to phone records, witness statements, or even traffic camera footage. An alibi that didn't hold up under intense scrutiny would significantly heighten suspicion, narrowing the focus to that individual. Furthermore, physical evidence found on the suspect, or within their known environments, could provide crucial corroboration. This might include physical evidence like blood on clothing, perhaps from the victim, or even small, almost imperceptible injuries on the suspect consistent with a struggle. The condition of the crime scene itself could also be telling. A damaged scene, perhaps with overturned furniture or signs of a violent struggle, could be consistent with an internal conflict rather than a swift, decisive act by an unknown intruder. All these pieces, meticulously gathered and analyzed, began to form a compelling picture, tightening the investigative net around the individual believed to be responsible for the unspeakable act. The converging lines of forensic analysis, digital footprints, and alibi inconsistencies created an undeniable web of evidence, tightening around the primary suspect. The methodical, dispassionate work of the investigators had finally yielded a breakthrough, transforming suspicion into actionable certainty. The moment arrived for an intervention, a direct confrontation with the individual believed to be responsible for the brutal execution of the mother and her infants. The suspect was arrested, often in a manner designed to minimize risk and prevent any destruction of further evidence. This moment, whether it was a quiet apprehension at a workplace or a more dramatic scene at a residence, marked the culmination of weeks or months of intensive investigative effort. The public often sees these moments captured in raw footage. The individual arriving in handcuffs, their face perhaps obscured or stoic, being escorted by uniformed officers. Or perhaps a still image of them being ushered into a squad car, their newfound status as a detained suspect starkly evident against the backdrop of their former life. For the victim's family, this act of apprehension, however delayed, represented the first tangible step towards accountability for the unspeakable loss they had endured. What often followed the arrest was a period of intense interrogation, a psychological battle where seasoned detectives sought to break through any denial and elicit the truth. In some cases, the pressure of the mounting evidence, combined with strategic questioning, led to a chilling admission. The suspect would then provide a confession admission, words that would forever haunt the legal proceedings and the memory of the victims' families. These confessions could vary in their nature, reflecting different states of mind during the commission of the crime. Some perpetrators might admit to a sudden, uncontrollable rage, uttering phrases such as, "I lost control," attempting to frame their heinous acts as a momentary, unpremeditated outburst. Others might express a twisted sense of regret, claiming, "I didn't mean to," even as their actions clearly demonstrated deliberate intent. In the most chilling instances, the confession was an outright conviction of intent, a stark, unembellished admission of their murderous purpose, revealing a cold depravity that transcended any fleeting emotion. These raw, unvarnished admissions provided crucial insight into the final, terrifying moments of the victims' lives and offered a glimpse into the disturbed mind of the perpetrator. Following the confession, or as charges were formally laid, the legal charges were enumerated. The seriousness of the crime demanded the most severe indictments. Typically, the suspect would face first-degree murder charges for the execution of the mother, signifying premeditation and deliberate intent to kill. For the infants, depending on jurisdiction and the specifics of the crime, the charges might include additional counts of first-degree murder, or potentially manslaughter or filicide, the legal term specifically denoting the killing of one's own child. The precise wording of these charges reflected the brutal reality of the crime, categorizing the acts according to the intent and the vulnerability of the victims. Each charge carried the weight of a life brutally extinguished, and together, they built a formidable case for justice. The arrest and the subsequent legal proceedings transformed a private horror into a public reckoning, bringing the full force of the law to bear upon an individual who had shattered the most fundamental trusts. The meticulous work of investigation culminated in this moment, where the pieces of the grim puzzle finally clicked into place, leading to the identification and capture of the perpetrator. With the suspect identified, arrested, and often having confessed, the complex machinery of the justice system engaged fully. This phase transitioned the narrative from the investigative hunt to the formal quest for accountability. The focus shifted to legal proceedings and outcome, a methodical process designed to ensure justice for the victims and their families. The journey through the courts could be protracted and emotionally grueling. If the case proceeded to trial, preliminary hearings would set the stage, allowing for the presentation of initial evidence and the shaping of arguments. Actual trial scenes, often depicted through courtroom stills or narrated with a detached voiceover, would unfold with meticulous detail. Prosecutors would present the overwhelming forensic evidence. The DNA matches, the fingerprint analyses, the ballistic reports, all meticulously collected from the crime scene. They would detail the inconsistencies in the suspect's alibi, the chilling digital trail of messages and calls, and the profound lack of remorse exhibited throughout the confession. Expert testimonies would delve into the nature of the wounds, the time of death, and the psychological profiles, all painting a harrowing picture for the jury. The defense, conversely, would attempt to poke holes in the prosecution's narrative, questioning the chain of custody for evidence, the reliability of witness testimonies, or perhaps the suspect's mental state at the time of the crime. These courtroom battles, while necessary for due process, would often reopen old wounds for the victims' families, forcing them to relive the unspeakable horror in excruciating detail. Ultimately, the proceedings would culminate in a verdict stated. In many of these cases, the weight of the evidence, often bolstered by the suspect's own admissions, would lead to a guilty verdict. In other instances, a plea bargain might be struck, where the defendant pleads guilty to specific charges in exchange for certain concessions, avoiding a lengthy trial. The sentencing details would then follow, outlining the precise punishment for the heinous crimes. This often involved life imprisonment, sometimes with the explicit condition of years without parole, ensuring that the perpetrator would spend the remainder of their natural life confined, never again posing a threat to society. The finality of the sentence, while bringing a form of closure, could never truly erase the profound pain inflicted or bring back the lives that were so cruelly taken. The verdict represented justice, but not reconciliation for the loss. In some scenarios, particularly with more recent cases, the legal proceedings might still be pending. The voiceover would then provide a status update, informing the audience that the case is ongoing, or that the trial is upcoming, leaving the formal resolution hanging in the balance, a stark reminder that justice, while relentless, is often a slow and deliberate process. These pending cases leave families in a continuous state of agonizing limbo, awaiting the final chapter in their devastating ordeal. As the narrative concludes, the solemn gravity of the crime remains. The narrator closes with a reflective commentary, extending beyond the specifics of the case to touch upon broader, critical issues. This commentary often centers on mental health awareness, highlighting how profound psychological breakdowns, if left unaddressed, can lead to unspeakable acts of violence. The story serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences when inner turmoil spirals out of control. It underscores the vital importance of early intervention in relationship or mental breakdowns. Identifying and addressing warning signs in intimate relationships, whether they be escalating tensions, controlling behaviors, or threats of violence, can be crucial in preventing such tragedies. Similarly, recognizing the symptoms of severe mental health crises and ensuring individuals receive timely professional help can be life-saving, not only for those suffering but for those around them. The narrative often includes advice on recognizing warning signs for the audience. This is not about assigning blame but empowering individuals to identify patterns of behavior that might indicate escalating danger, whether in their own relationships or those of people they know. These signs could include sudden shifts in temperament, extreme jealousy, social isolation, threats of self-harm or harm to others, or significant changes in financial stability. The overarching message is one of heightened awareness and proactive action, urging individuals to seek help or report concerns before a situation escalates to an irreversible point. The story of the mother and her babies, brutally executed, serves as a stark, permanent caution against overlooking the shadows that can gather within seemingly ordinary lives. It is a grim testament to the fact that the most profound horrors can unfold within the most intimate of spaces, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow and an enduring call for vigilance. The chilling reality of such events necessitates a deeper understanding, not just of the crime itself, but of the societal fissures that sometimes allow such tragedies to occur.
Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more.